We're now on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis, and we're trying to reconcile whether or not the mishpacha in Eretz Yisrael that's stam, we don't have a cheskas psul nor a cheskas kashrus. What's its status? Kan, when we see that the implication of the brisa is that if it's a stam mishpacha in Eretz Yisrael, then it needs bedika. Lasio isha. If you have a mishpacha miyucheses that wants to marry an isha miyucheses, so that the bas who's born from such marriage is allowed to marry Kohen, then we need to assume in the negative that it's bechezkas possible, and if you have to do a bedika. But kan, when it seems from the brisa that stam ben Eretz Yisrael is kosher, you don't need a bedika, that's lahotzi isha miyada. In other words, if there's no chazak of psul and it already isn't a marriage, we're not going to say that because of the suffix we're going to bust up the marriage and force them to deliver a divorce. Rav Yosef, kol shesichaso bebavel, anyone who speaks Babylonian, we have a chazaka that he is from the Miuchasim of Bnei Bavel. Umasiyan lo isha, we can marry a woman from that family even without bedika. Va'idna de'ika ramoy, but today there are Ramboim who have taught themselves the Babylonian language so that they would convince us that they were ksherim when in fact they were psulim is chayshin, and therefore we're not going to rely on the fact that a person comes from Bavel and he speaks the Babylonian language and therefore assume that he's a miyuchas. We're not going to marry him until we check out his yichus. Seiri avikam ishtamit minei Rabbi Yochanan. Seiri was a Babylonian, and he somehow avoided any encounter with Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Dahavi omale nasiv barti. Rabbi Yochanan was trying to allure or convince Zeiri to marry his daughter, meaning Rabbi Yochanan's daughter. And since Zeiri was from Bavel, and Eretz Yisrael is like an Isa to Bavel, therefore Zeiri did not want to marry the daughter of Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore he wouldn't show up in front of Rabbi Yochanan. But Yom Echad Avika Asli Ba'orcha, it turns out that Rabbi Yochanan was escorted by Zeiri in the derech, Matu li urkima demaya, and they got to some sort of puddle of water. Arkevei Rabbi Yochanan Katve v'kama aberle. And Zeiri put Rabbi Yochanan onto his shoulder, and he crossed over this large puddle of water. Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan says to him, O Raisan Kshera, our Torah is Kshera Beinecha, and you're studying Torah from me, but Bansin Lo Kshera, but you're not willing to marry my daughter? She's not miyucheses in your eyes? Oh, my Torah is good enough, but you don't want to marry my daughter because the yuchsin of my Torah is Torah Kshera, but not the yuchsin for my daughter. My daitoch, why do you believe that you as a Babylonian belong to the miyuchasim, the Babylonians are miyuchasim? Ilema, if it's me, the Tanan, Mishum to Tanan, because of the mission that we learned to Daf Samach Tes. Asor yuchsin olu mi bavel. And Ezra took the Jews from Bavel, Kohanim, Levium, etc. And he took from Bavel to Mamzerim, the Nesinim, and all the other Psulim. And you think that there was nothing left in Bavel of any of the Psulim, and therefore they have a greater yichus than Eretz Yisrael. No. Atu Kohanim, Levium, Yisrael, Kulei Sliku. Is it really true that he took away all the Kohanim, Yisrael, and Levium that came there? No. There were plenty of psulim that were left back in Bavel. And therefore, ki hechi dish tiyur mihani ish tiyur nami mihani. Just like there were ksherim left behind, then it's logical to assume that there are psulim left behind. So you don't have a chazaka because you're one of the Bnei Bavel to assume that you're definitely miyuchas more than the Bnei Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara explains that Rabbi Yochanan held that way, Dishmetise, Hadi Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yochanan came to that conclusion that there were psulim left over in Bavel because he never knew and he was never aware of the statement of Rabbi Elazar, Ola Ezra Bavel Acha So Kisos Nekiyaviola, which means that when Ezra went on in Aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he took all the psulim and he didn't leave any psulim behind. Another story. Ula Ikel from Pedisa Lebei Rabbi Yehuda. Ula was in the house of Rabbi Yehuda in Pedisa, Chazia, and he saw Rabbi Yitzchak Bered Rabbi Yehuda, the god of Elonosiv, that Rabbi Yitzchak was getting older and he wasn't getting married. Amalei, so Ula says to Rabbi Yehuda, my time will come minsav le mar it's celebrate. Why is it that you don't find a woman, a wife for your son? I don't know from which mishpacha I should choose a wife for my son because I don't know which mishpacha is miyucheses. Amalei Ula responds, Otu anan miyadina mehecha kasina, and do we know what our yichus is? Maybe we belong to those mishpachos about which the pasuk in Eov in Perek Hey says, "Noshim b'tzion inu b'sulos b'yari Yehuda." Maybe we are descendants of those women that were never raped by goyim at the time of the Churban Abayis, and maybe they had children that were born to them. We are also there for psulim. That depends on the old machlokas whether Akum b'Yevet Abba Basra saw moms or not. And maybe we'll say we don't have to be choshesh for our yichus because Ovi Kochav Eved Abba Basra of like kosher is Dilma. We still have to be choshesh. Why? Perhaps mihanach d'chsiribahu. Maybe we are zera, meaning descendants of those about whom the pasuk in Amos Perek Vav says, "Hashokvim al mitos shein usruchim al arsosam." And what does this mean? The pshuta shel mikra is that the Navi is turning to those who live in Eretz Yisrael, and they think they're very secure and shketim v'armaronim, and they get involved in all sort of tanoges, and they sleep on beautiful beds that are made of elephants' trunks. I think it's called the ivory in English, if I'm not mistaken. Shemutzos b'matziim gidolim, and they have beautiful sheets that go from side to side. They even go overlap. And libam einam ka'uv me'ashever anora asid lifkodes Yisrael. They're not nervous about what's going to happen in the future. The Omer of Yossi Rab Chanina, who are these sruchim mentioned in the pasuk? Elu bnei adam hamashtinim mayim b'fnei mitoseim arumim. They stand naked in front of their beds and they urinate. Because Baruch doesn't like those people. Umegadef ba Rabbi Avo, and Rabbi Avo would ask a kasha on this interpretation that was suggested by Rabbi Yossi. If the pasuk is referring to those, hainu dechsiv, how are you going to explain that which it says in the next part of the pasuk, as far as the punishment? Lochein ata yiglu berosh golam. Frekti Rabbi Avo, the kasha, mishum de mashtinin mayim if naming toseim arumim. Therefore, yigalu rosh berosh golim. Their punishment is so severe that they will be at the beginning of the line of golim. That can't be the pasuk. El Amar Abo. What does it mean? Shofan al mitos shein. Elu bnei adam sha'ochlu v'shosim zem zeh. And they get so involved in tanugos of eating and drinking, it comes to sexual immorality. They start putting their beds together, machlifin shosem zeh, they swap wives. And therefore, the sruchim ala rososam, masrichim are sosam b'shichva zer sheino shalahem. And therefore, as a result, the children are mamzerim, and the punishment is appropriate that they'll be at the Rosh HaGolan. So how do we know for sure that we are not from that zera and descendants of those? And that would mean mamzeros. Amalei Rav Yehuda responds, Heichi navid. On what basis can we rely on bedikas yuchsin amalei zil basar shtikusa? Go and see if you have a mishpacha that is shatkonis. Shatkonis means, they are very humble and soft-spoken. That's a mishpacha miyucheses. Ki hai de bodki b'nei marava. That's how we check out the b'nei Eretz Yisrael. D'chi minsu beitrei badi adadi. When there's a fight, an ongoing altercation between two families, chazu haiminayim dekodim v'shosik. Let's see who instigated the battle and who was shosek. And Amri Haimi Yuchas Tfei, and then you'll be able to determine which of the families have greater Yuchsa. The fact that Bnei Bavel are low-toned, that itself proves that they are B'chezkas Miyuchas. So Gemara's Eini for Ikla Rav. When Rav married off his son to the daughter of someone by the name of Bar Shefi Chola, Ubadak Vahu, when he checked out the kashrus, my lab b'yuchas suda, doesn't mean that he checked out the Friedrich Doros in order to see if they're b'yuchasim. So Rav himself didn't rely on the shtika. And the Gemara answers, lo, Rav was not bodek the yichus of the Doros, but rather b'shtikusa, he tried to determine and evaluate the midah of their shatkanus, that they were silent, low-toned. And that's how he determined their yichus. Hachikam lahu v'duku ishaski lo shaski. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Imra Isa shnei b'nei adam shemisgarim zeh b'zeh. You see a constant altercation between two people, then that proves that shemetz psul yesh be'echad miyam, that one of the two is born to a psul. V'ein menichan soli davek echad b'chavero. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought down a battle, created and generated an altercation between them in order that no one should marry them. And that altercation, that Mariva, would prove, hey, you know what, there's a Shemetz Psul here, let's stay away. And we see something similar on Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Imra Isa Shtei Mishpachos Karazu Bezu, Shemetz Pasu Yesh Bi Achas Mihen, V'yein Menichan Oso Lidavik B'chavrata. One of these two families is a Kshera, the other is a Psula, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to separate the two families so there wouldn't be an admixture of a Kshera marrying a Psula, and therefore he generated a friction between the two families. Amar Rav Papa Saba, the elderly Rav Papa, declared B'Shmei Rav in the name of Rav Bavel Bria, Meishon Mesa, Modai Chola, Elam Goseses. Bavel is healthy, meaning as far as Yuchsin are, it's Nikia Mipsulim. Meishon is a place where Mesa, Jews who come from there, are all Mamzerim and Psulim. Modai Chole, a Jew comes from Modai, is Chole. Chole means he's not completely pasul. He's mostly kosher, but there are psul. Elam Goseses. A Jew who comes from Elam is assumed to be a pasul because Rubam psulim. Uma ben cholin ligosisim, rov cholim chayim, rov gosim lamis. So we use the term chole to indicate that the rov is kosher. But when we say that Elam is Goseses, we use the word Gosesim or Goseses to indicate that the majority are Psulim. Ad Heichon hi Bavel. What are the gvulos of the width of Bavel? Now, it's known that the gvul of the width on the western side is Nahar Pros, the Euphrates River. But what's the gvul of the Rochev on the eastern side, beyond what's called the Nar Chidekel? Rav Amar ad Nar Azok, Ushmuel Amar ad Nahar Yoeni, which is more to the east of Nar Azok. The Gemara clarifies. Le'el b'diglas ad heicha. We're talking about the river called Chidekel. Where is the point of the gvul of the orech? Until now, we're talking about the rochev of Bavel on the side of the Chidekel. So that would mean the southeastern side of Bavel. Rav Hamar, according to Rav, ad Bagda ve'ivna. Right, there are two cities, like twin cities, next to each other, on two sides south of Chidekel. Shmuel Amar, the orech is much larger, ad Mushkine, until a place called Mushkine. Below Mushkine Bechla, but Mushkine itself is not part of Bavel. So Gemara Yesva Amar, Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Shmuel Mushkine Arei Kegola. In other words, it has the same status as Pumbedisa in Bavel, which is called Gola, Lo Yuchsin. So why do you say that it's not, Mushkine is not part of Bavel? Ella, we have to say, Ad Mushkine Mushkine Bechlal. The Orech of Bavel reaches Mushkine and includes Mushkine within the boundaries of Bavel, which means that if you want to get married to a girl from Mushkine, there's no need for a Badika. The Gemara adds the following clarification. Letachtis b'diglas, below the Chidekel ad heicha. How far does the orech of Bavel go on the bottom side of the Chidekel, meaning on the northeastern side? Amar Rav Shmuel ad Apamya Tata, until the city of Apamya, the lower one. Apparently, there's the higher Apamya and the lower Apamya. And Apamya Tachtona, or Tata, is not included in Bavel. The Gemara asks, Tarte Apamya Havyon, are there in truth two cities that are called Apamya? Chadi Ilav and Chadi Tatiosa, one which is the Elyona, which is on the southern side, and one is the lower one, which is on the northern side. That's exactly what it is. So there's a distance of a parsa that separates the Afamya Elyon from the Afamya Tachton. And the members of the city of one of these two cities are makpid with regard to the Bnei Ha'ir Ashniya, to the other city. And they don't even borrow like a match, one from the other. They want to be machik one from the other, so there shouldn't be any intermarriage. V'simonech, and if you need a simon v'yodcha, that you shouldn't make any mistake, which is the afamya psula and which is the kshera, is the psula, so the afamya psula, had mishtaya. What does it mean, had mishtaya? Meishonis. They speak a language which is called Meshon. And the reason for that is because they border on Meshon. The Gemara now adds to clarify the gvul of the Orech of Bavel on the western side. Li'el bipras adhena, on the gvul of the Orech of Bavel above the Euphrates, which would mean the southwestern gvul of Bavel. Again, a machlokas. Rav Omar ad Akra de Tul Bakne, and Shmuel goes even further, extending it ad Gishra de Beipras, which is south of Ikra de Tublanki. Rabbi Yochanan has a smaller more constricted area that's called Bavel, Omar Adma Bores de Gizma, which is north of Akra de Tuvlanki. So we need really a map here of Bavel. Layat Abai v'Temer of Yosef Adara. Abai and others say it was Yosef. They were so dead opposed to anyone who relies with regard to Yuchsin on Rav, with regard to the Gvul of Bavel. Because according to Rav, the Orech of Bavel stretches down very, very far south. So the Gemara asks, Ad Rav Layat, Ad Shmuel Lo Layat? According to Shmuel, the Gvul of Bavel on the southern side is wider and more extensive than that of Rav. So why aren't you putting a whammy on Shmuel? Ella Layat Ad Rav, a Kolshkin Ad Shmuel. That Abai and Rav Yosef, if you take Layat, literally means they were Makalel, anyone who was Noeg like Shmuel, who expanded the Gvul to the southern side more than Rav. Ibais Ema, I'll give you another possible alternative way of reconciling this. The Olam Ad Rav Layat, Ad Shmuel Lo Layat. He was Makal, those who are Noeg based on Rav, but not those who are Noeg based on Shmuel. The Gishra de Bepras, because that sign that Shmuel gave as far as the southernmost Gvul on the western side of Bavel is Latoye Havakasi. It's north of Ikra de Tulbanki, and therefore Shmuel is reducing the Gvul of Bavel more than Rav. And here on the top of Daf Ayin Beis, for Inuhu de Dalyue Parsoi. Now the Parsoi, the Parsiim, changed things around. They changed that location where that bridge was. They took it out, they undermined it, and uprooted it from its place, its original place, and they put it to the south of Ikra de Tulbanki. And yet Shmuel, when he was mitzayin that this is part of the boundaries of Bavel, that was before this whole story with the Parsi. So Shmuel was reference to the original extent and boundaries of Bavel. Now we're talking about the western boundary of Bavel, west of Nar Pros. Lahag Gisa de Pros ad Heicha. How far does the boundary of Bavel on the western side of Nar Pros, how far does it extend? Why did you think of such a question? Mishum Biram. You want to clarify the yichus of those who live in Biram, which is situated on the western side, the bank of Nar Pros. You should know that even miyachse de Pumbedisa, mi Biram Nasbi, even the most miyuchasos of the mishpachos of Pumbedisa, which that's already the highest echelon, and they are between Pras and Chidekel, they will marry girls from Biram, because B'nai Biram are muchzakim to miyuchasim ka'anshe Bavel. So this is where we're going to stop now. And in Mirza Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick it up with Omar Rav Papa on Daf Ayin Beis.